and then going to Belize, and then, fly fishing for rolling tarpon in front of a bar during happy hour. So I had a 105-pound tarpon on, and the thing was down 30 feet, and you could see it just sitting there using its weight against you. And all these people on the beach were drinking and cheering me on, like, come on, get it, get it, get it. And the captain saying, I know everybody on that beach, you have to land this fish. Don't screw up.
Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer Podcast, inspiring real women with a passion for fishing in the outdoors to go get their adventure on. Now, here's your host, coming to you from the Lance Chuck Camper Mobile Podcast Studio, Master Captain Angie Scott.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Woman Angler and Adventurer Podcast. I hope you all had a fantastic Memorial Day weekend. If you were able to get out on the water, I hope you had a safe time and caught a lot of fish. On this week's episode, I'm excited to introduce you to another West Coast angler by the name of Kesley Gallagher. I say West Coast, but Kesley travels the world with her fly rod in search of world record catches and tournament fishing and so many other exciting adventures. Imagine the adventures she's had fishing Labrador for trophy brook trout, the Bahamas and Hawaii for bonefish, Louisiana for trophy redfish, Belize and the Mexican Yucatan for permit, and Costa Rica for trophy tarpon. You're in for a real treat this week, that's all I gotta say. A lot of these trips, too, she's done solo, so we talk a little bit about that. She also talks about some of her world record catches and how she decides which one to go after next. I can't wait for y'all to hear all about it, so let's not waste any more time and dive right in. Enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Women Angler and Adventurer Podcast. I have Kesley Gallagher on the show this week. And Kesley, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're on the West Coast, right?
I am in Los Angeles.
That's awesome, too, because I rarely get the chance to feature West Coast anglers. It seems like most of the ladies I come across are, down in Florida or the other coast. So it's always exciting for me to get to feature somebody who's out that way.
Yeah, no, it's great to talk about California and the West Coast because it is forgotten.
Yeah.
But there's this huge coastline. We have the Sierra Nevada and even the Southern Cascades in the state. So it's actually really cool with all the indigenous trout species and salmon and everything else that we can explore.
That's awesome. Did you grow up in that area then?
Actually, no. Okay. I was born in Australia.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up in Virginia and then in Florida, went to school in Maine, and then came west back in 1994.
Gotcha.
So I've been in California a bit,
yeah,
but now it's home.
Right. Yeah, that's a long time. I am originally from Minnesota and moved to Nashville in 99, so I can kind of relate with, this feeling like home at this point. So
yeah.
So very cool. So I know I read a little background on you, and I know that you got involved in fly fishing at a pretty young age. So I always love to hear the story of like what kind of led you down that path.
Sure. Well, the funny thing is, people ask me, well, what was the first fish you ever caught? And I can't tell you. I've been fishing before I could remember. So, and it was always, I guess, for bass or panfish conventionally. Mm-hmm. But my family is full of anglers. And it was actually in Montana with my stepfather's family in Glacier National Park. And we went up to a place called Trout Lake. And that's where I first held a fly rod. And they said, just cast over there by that log jam. And it was like a royal wolf, which is a kind of fly, an attractor fly. And up came this cutthroat trout and grabbed the fly. And I can remember that. I can see the trout clear as day right now. And it just made such a heavy impression on me. And I thought, this is where it's at. Wow. This is, I just fell in love with that moment, with the beauty of it, the simplicity of it. And I've been pursuing fly fishing ever since.
So was that literally your first cast ever?
Yes. Yes.
That's amazing. You don't hear that kind of a story very often.
And I was only 10 years old. I had no idea what I was doing,
Yeah.
but I saw the goal.
That's awesome. That's like
Yeah.
meant to be kind of a scenario, it
Right.
sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, my first catch on the fly was, we were talking offline. I was down in Florida for the redfish roadie road trip, and I'd only practiced casting just very minimal. Like Jen Ripples kind of showed me a few things, and I practiced like in a field just for a little bit, but I never like practiced any of the like, what do you do after you get a fish on the hook?
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was, luckily I was with a friend and a guide, and they kind of coached me through what to do next.
Very cool. Very cool.
But
yeah, people forget it's not just about the cast. It's, all of a sudden you have a fish on the line and you have a much lighter gear. And
yeah,
do you pull the line with your hands, or do you reel it in?
Right.
It's funny how people just don't address that.
yeah, absolutely. I got to try, I think it's called tenkara, when I was in Colorado, and didn't actually fish, or we were just practice casting. But I was like, this is a good way, because you don't have to deal with the reel and all that other stuff.
Yeah, we actually went tenkara fishing. Well, a friend of mine did in the LA River for carp, and he hooked what must have been a 10-pound carp.
Oh man!
And the thing took off, and he had to run to keep up with it. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, that can make it very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I can kind of relate to that first cutthroat experience in that I've gotten into bass fishing now. Being that I grew up in Minnesota, I grew up walleye fishing. That was kind of our thing, and maybe like crappie and bluegills. But so when I got down to Nashville, the lake that I'm on does not have walleye in it, so I had to figure out something else to go after. And so I started dabbling in bass fishing, and one day I'd heard about people catching topwater bass, and I never had that experience. So one day I took like a popper out, and just all afternoon I was just throwing that thing like, I'm going to catch a topwater bass, and it finally happened, and it scared the crap out of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Now I get bass fishing.
It's explosive. We have a local lake, and, like a week ago, we went topwater bass fishing with a fly rod. Just using like a deer hair popper, same principle, cast right to the weed line, pop that fly and wait.
Yeah.
And then the fish will just eye it, a largemouth bass, they'll eye it and you just twitch it and they hit it. And it's the best feeling.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, I got him.
Yeah. So much fun. Well, I know that you, over the years, have obviously progressed quite a bit since you were 10 years old, and you've gotten to travel to some very remote and awesome destination locations for fishing.
Yeah.
So I wanna talk a little bit about that. You've traveled so much, I don't even know where to start, but maybe you could kind of.
I'll start you out. Back in 98, my mom said, Kesley, why don't we take a trip together before, your life takes a turn, like you get married or something like that. I said, yeah, Mom, I have a great destination in mind. She said, oh, you mean like Paris or London? I said, no, let's go to Labrador to fish for trophy brook trout.
Oh, wow.
She said, what? So needless to say, I arranged the trip, and we went up to Labrador in northern Canada, just south of, a bit farther south from the Arctic Circle. And, we flew from Boston to Nova Scotia to Goose Bay, and then took a float plane into the bush, so to speak, to Minipee Lakes. And that's where they do have trophy brook trout, I think up to 10 pounds. And my mother had to learn how to fly fish. And when we got off the float plane, the cook ran out. And mind you, it's a camp like you would see in Alaska. The cook ran out of the cabin and said to the pilot, why didn't you tell me you were bringing women? I would have cleaned the place up.
I guess.
And it was the first time the camp, or this facility had ever had 2 women anglers.
Ah,
So we broke a glass ceiling that trip.
yeah.
And mom caught her first brook trout on fly. We caught pike. And, my largest trout was about 8 pounds, which was
Wow.
pretty cool.
That is
And,
nice trout.
and considering now I chase records, I had a record in my hand, but had no idea that I did. But, going to a remote area, sight unseen, and just, that adventurous spirit and seeing the northern lights, fishing under the northern lights, it really lit a fire inside of me to see what more I could do.
Yeah.
And, to go to places that, women just don't go to alone. And a lot of my adventures have been by myself. Like I took a 2-week trip back in 2016 to Costa Rica to fly fish for tarpon near the Panamanian border at a place called Tarponville. And I was just beginning to understand, how to fight tarpon on a fly rod. And here we were, casting with 12 weight rods, which is a heavy rod, to tarpon. And then I think the heaviest fish I had on was probably 120, 140 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
So to understand that it's going to take you 45 minutes to bring this thing in, was a lesson. And I did break one rod. I mean, the thing busted in 2 pieces or 3 pieces. But just learning how these fish act was not just the adventure; it was obviously educational.
Right.
And then going to Belize, and then fly fishing for rolling tarpon in front of a bar during happy hour. So I had 105-pound tarpon on, and the thing was down 30 feet, and you could see it just sitting there using its weight against you. And all these people on the beach were drinking and cheering me on, like, "Come on, get it, get it, get it!"
That's so cool.
And the captain is saying, "I know everybody on that beach. You have to land this fish. Don't screw up."
No pressure.
But no pressure. But it's that adventure and just getting that fish that I live for.
That's so cool. Well, you mentioned Labrador, so I remember way back on episode 30 of the Woman Angler and Adventure, I had Noam Buckman on the show.
Oh, yeah.
And she had a trip to Labrador, and so we talked about that on the episode because she ended up writing an article about it for Dun Magazine. And so I remember that, being quite the destination location. She caught a nice snaky long pike while she was there as well. So that's so cool. And then the other thing you're talking about reminded me of, fighting a fish for 45 minutes. I don't know if you're familiar with the show Wicked Tuna.
I am.
Okay. So the family of the Marcianos, that fish the hard merchandise, and now they have the Falcon. And Angelica, the daughter, she goes out with them or used to go out with them. I haven't kept up with it here lately or if it's still even on, but I had her on the show, and sometimes they fight these tuna for like 7, 8, 9 hours.
Right.
And I asked her what it was like to have a fight like that and end up losing the fish. Have you ever had, I know you probably haven't had anything quite that long, but have you had any ones that end up in heartbreak like that? Yes,
it was my first attempt at the ladies tarpon tournament in Isla Mirada, Florida. And, it was the first day, and I hooked 140-pound tarpon.
Oh my gosh.
And this thing is just leaping and just running everywhere. My guide's screaming at me because we're trying to, we're chasing it down in the boat, and I'm like, I'm on it. I'm reeling as fast as I can. And, he's taking line. And it was just this panic. And, for 15 minutes trying to tame this creature, and a fish jumped up in the air for like the 5th time, landed on the leader and snapped it.
Oh, man.
And even though we placed first that day, that could have been the fish.
Yeah. Still.
And that was a heartbreak, but it made me so motivated to come back the following year. So it's just, you live for those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a tournament situation, that's definitely the last thing you want to have happen.
Right.
But things happen. I mean, it's fishing, so
it's life.
Yeah, exactly. So when did you get into tournament fishing?
Well, it was when Heidi Newt called me up. She saw that I had gotten, a lot of big redfish in Louisiana, over 30 pounds. And then I broke a record. And so I set that record, and she called me up and she said, Kesley, we'd like you to come to the Ladies Tarpon tournament. I said, well, there aren't any tarpon in California. So I'm not sure how I'm going to practice. And she just laughed at me. She said, I know you know how to use an airplane. I know you know how to travel. Get out here. So, that's what started it. And then meeting, all these really serious and famous female anglers like Meredith McCord, just to get me motivated and, to step up my game. And so that's what got me into it. And, I used to be a competitive equestrian. So there is that edge to me that I love to use sometimes. So, I came back the following year, when I lost that 140 pounder and I won.
Nice.
And it was a fantastic feeling to, say I came this far, this fast, and was able to win.
That is
that
amazing.
to me was a big accomplishment.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I've yet to catch my first tarpon, so
you got to do it.
I've been around them, like down in Florida when we've been fishing, even on the redfish roadie road trip. Where you see them rolling and whatever. But they're such a difficult fish to. It's like hunting.
If I could do it, you could do it.
Oh.
I mean, I remember we were down in Espiritu Santo Bay in Mexico. And I had a woman with me, and she's like, I don't think I could catch a tarpon. I'm like, what? Why not? You're here. Go for it. And that's always my attitude. Like, well, you're here. You might as well try. And I think she finally did get a tarpon. And,
nice.
You start with the juveniles and you get your courage up and your confidence, and don't do what I did and go down to Costa Rica and catch over 100 pounder the first time. But you can. There are all kinds of sizes of tarpon. Yeah. You don't always have to catch the giants.
Right. Yeah. I'd be happy with whatever size, just to say I caught a tarpon.
Yeah. There you go.
That's cool. So I want to talk about these world records. How many do you currently hold?
I don't know how many I hold because they've retired a few, but I know I have managed 16 at this point.
Wow.
There's always more fish to go after. And I just got 2 big cutthroat from Pyramid Lake. Now, Pyramid Lake produces fish well over 20 pounds. So, to me, the goal is still, over 20 pounds. I might have set these records under 20 pounds, but it's still, those fish are still out there. And, any destination I go to, I start eyeing the species of fish. And is there a potential to set another record?
It's cool. I've never thought about going after that, targeting certain species on certain, however you set these. How do you go about your strategy on what you want to try to conquer next?
Well, when I first started doing this, it was with Greg Dinney. He's a guide in the Keys and also in Louisiana. And when I first went fly fishing with him for redfish, he said, that women's fly fishing redfish 16-pound tippet record, it's a mouthful, is wide open. So let's put you on 16-pound tippet and see what we can do. Now, I had never been exposed to that sort of thing, but I did manage a fish that was a pound shy. And with my competitive nature, I'm like, I'm coming back and we're doing this.
Nice.
So, what I do is I go to igfa.org. I look at world records. And then if the species of fish, say, for example, is a redfish or a red drum, you would look up those records. Now, currently, a lot of the women's records back in 2016 were well under 30 pounds. Now I think they're just north of 40 pounds.
Wow.
So the women's areas of popular fish, those records are being set pretty much, and they're going to be hard to beat. But if you go to, like brook trout, for example, they're high, but they're not unobtainable. So again, you just got to understand what's in your area. If for you, I think landlocked striper, like landlocked striped bass, that's wide open. I think all those records are vacant.
Oh, wow.
So you have a potential to set those records.
Okay.
And they go from 2 pound, 4 pound, 6 pound, 12 pound, 16 and 20.
Oh, wow.
And so you go to your your shop and ask for IGFA leader or tippet, and that tippet should break at the appropriate poundage. Like I'm not sure the plus or minus, but if you can manage a 4 pound record, there's plus or minus, I think 0.5 pounds, but I'm not sure of the tolerance. But you can set your tippet and, go for that bass record. And so long as it's over at 2 pounds or over for a 4 pound tippet, you should be able to set that record.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, that's a whole nother thing I've never really thought about.
So. I guess for work, I used to send in documentation to the FDA to get approvals for drugs and medical devices. So to me, sending in a submission with data is no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. So you've traveled to all these remote places and some solo trips. Do you have any tips for women to things that they should kind of think about or prepare for?
I guess always carry your rods and reels with you onto the plane. Don't lose sight of those, because that's a lot of money. And if you travel overseas or even to the Keys, those rods and reels and flies are not easily replaceable.
Right.
So always make sure they're within your sight. I would rather lose my clothes and my rods and reels. Now that I say that will probably happen on my next trip.
I hope not.
And to always have courage, go with another group of women or with your best friend, but push yourself to go outside of the resorts and see if you can. Like when I had to go to New Orleans, I couldn't go to a mothership or anything like that because I couldn't afford it. I had a budget. I had to stick to that budget. That I made sure that I was in a safe location and that, my guide, Greg Denny, would pick me up. So I made sure that, I looked at every aspect to make sure, one, I was safe, and two, I knew exactly what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever purchase any kind of insurance for trips?
I recently, because of COVID and the pandemic, I did, because you never knew if something was going to cancel because of illness or something like that. So that actually was the first time that I've ever purchased insurance.
Gotcha.
We had a trip to Cricket and Ackland's Bahamas, and that was the first time where they really recommended we purchase travel insurance in case the island wasn't going to accept anyone from the United States because of COVID.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Well, cool. Well, what do you have coming up? I know you've got a trip coming up here in a couple weeks.
Yeah. But actually on Saturday, I'm going to Northern California to go to the McCloud rivers. It's a Southern Cascade and the Fall River, just to take advantage of a green drake hatch potentially and get some, native trout. But then my fiance and I are going to go to Florida to do some red fishing, and then we're off to Belize to get married.
Nice.
Permit fishing.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we're going to go permit fishing first, since you apparently have to spend time in the country before you get married. We're going to get married and then go back to fishing. So.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
It's a nice excuse.
We're excited. Yes, absolutely.
Very cool. So one other question I had, do you do any sturgeon fishing at all ever?
I've never had the opportunity, although in Maine we were striper fishing and I got to see sturgeon. I never knew there was sturgeon in Maine.
I didn't know that either.
There they were. So no.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know I had somebody on the podcast from California recently that's what she does is sturgeon fishing. So that's why
the Columbia? Or is she in the Columbia or Sacramento?
I think she's San Francisco.
Okay.
Yep. Virginia Salvador.
Okay.
I don't know if you know her. I'm pretty sure that's who it was.
I don't know if there's still sturgeon in the Sacramento River, but that makes sense. That's near San Francisco.
Gotcha.
But
okay.
She would definitely go up to the Columbia River drainage.
Yeah. Yep, that's who it was. Captain Virginia Salvador out of San Francisco.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Nice.
Very cool. Well, where can people follow your adventures?
They can follow me on Instagram under Steely Chick.
Okay.
I first started posting when I was steelhead fishing in the Rogue River, and then it proceeded to blow up into saltwater. But my tag name is still Steely Chick, SteeliChick.
Got it. Okay.
And then of course on Facebook under Kesley Gallagher.
Got it. I'll put links to those in the show notes so people interested can keep up with all your future adventures and maybe check out some of your past ones as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to chat with me and be on the show. It was super fun, and I'm sure you're going to be a huge inspiration to a lot of listeners out there.
Oh, thank you, Angie, for the opportunity. I always have fun recounting my adventures, and even blows my mind where I've been sometimes.
That's what it's all about, is making those memories and having those experiences.
Absolutely.
Awesome.